Now it's Britain's biggest trade deal since leaving the EU.
Yes, the UK has agreed to join the Indo-Pacific trading bloc known as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership.
It's catchy, isn't it?
It's a tongue twister.
Very catchy. Now, the government says joining the group will boost UK exports by cutting tariffs on things like cheese, cars and whiskey.
Well, joining us for more is the former Special Advisor to Nadhim Zahawi Mark Lehain. Good morning to you, Mark. Look, this is something for the government to celebrate, the biggest trade deal then post-Brexit.
It really is good news for everybody for, I think, three main reasons. First of all, it's going to open up trade for British companies to lots of other countries around the world. Importantly, lots of fast-growing countries around the world. It's also going to make it easier for British consumers, people like you and me, to buy stuff from those countries more cheaply and more easily. So that's got to be a good thing. The other reason why it's a really great move is this is a proper free trade area. It doesn't have all the political connotations that we had with the European Union. There's not a political court at the top of it to try and enforce countries to be similar other than when they're trading with one another. So I think it's a really good move.
Where does it leave us in terms of our relationship with the EU and trading with them in terms of, I mean, we know they don't like it when we set up our own deals?
Well, listen, I mean, every country should be free to do what they think and what their voters think is right for them. So it looks like the CPTPP, I've got to get that right. It looks like that's the deal that we're going to be doing. That's going to be opening up trade for a whole load of other countries that account for, I think, around about 500 million people. So it's a bloc that's slightly bigger than the European Union was. And in terms of how the European Union feel about it, it does mean that we couldn't go back into the customs union with the European Union, which is what we know some people wanted us to do. So the European Union will have to get used to it. They themselves would, I think, probably like to do a trade deal with the CPTPP at some point. So we may yet find ourselves sat around the table with them in the near future, but this time as equals rather than a member.
OK, so I was going to go through the list of countries involved. We've got sort of old friends, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, big trading nations like Japan, Mexico, Vietnam, and then some other sort of smaller countries in terms of their sort of trading capabilities, Chile, Peru, Brunei, Malaysia and Singapore. I mean, we do have trade deals individually with a lot of those countries. So how does this work in a kind of more of a bloc, you know, sort of setting? And what are we giving them? What are we getting in return?
So what it should mean is that we're trading with all of those countries now in a very similar way. So rather than having a trade deal with some and not with others, we should be moving to a much more level playing field with them in that regard. But also, more importantly, this is a relatively new trade bloc. It's only been around for a few years. It's hoping to grow. So the great thing about us getting in now is that we will be at the table as a member when that trade bloc grows. So we will have a say on what other countries join, and we can try and ensure that that level playing field stays in place as other countries come in. And so this is also part of us pivoting to not just have a focus with our neighbours in Europe, which is still very important, but also pivoting to towards the Far East, where lots of growth is going on. I think, like I said, over 50% of forecast economic growth should be coming from these countries that we're joining up with.
Well, which would be very positive because we need it to grow, don't we? I mean, £1.8 billion, the PM says this is going to be worth to us. That's not a lot of money in the great scheme of things, sadly.
No, it isn't, but it's a start, and the whole point is how this impacts over the medium to long term. So, like I said, it's going to make it easier for UK businesses, in particular small and medium businesses, to sell their goods overseas, and it'll be good for the British consumer because it'll be easier for us to buy goods back over here. So 1.8 billion in the shorter run, but over time, as those other countries that are in the group grow, will benefit, but also as CPTPP itself grows, there'll be even more countries that we can trade with more freely and hopefully generate even more economic wealth.
What about jobs? Do we expect to see it help create jobs here in the UK?
Well, one would expect so, because normally the more trade there is, the more wealth there is, and therefore the more jobs that come with it, either through greater opportunities overseas or from consumers in the UK being able to save money on goods that we're already buying or being able to buy more goods elsewhere, and hence we can spend that money elsewhere. Again, it's one of those things, with the thing about trade is, often you can see the downsides to it because people can see if they've lost a job or if they've lost out to a competitor, but you can't always see directly what the benefits are. But we just know that free trade is one of the greatest things we've discovered as humans to improve our wealth and improve our lot over time.
Can we just ask you, because we do, I don't know if you're aware, we do a GBNews People's Poll every week. And in our People's Poll, what is coming in is quite interesting. I think the key point is Keir Starmer is preferred over Rishi Sunak to address crime and antisocial behaviour. Now, of course, antisocial behaviour has been part of the government agenda in the last week. But it's meant to be, traditionally, the Conservatives are meant to be the ones who people look to on law and order. The fact that this is shifting a little bit is a concern, isn't it, for the government?
This will be a big concern for the government, in particular for Rishi Sunak, who is projecting an image of a man who can get stuff done and whose priorities are the same as the man and woman on the streets' priorities. Now, listen, normally, as you said, law and order is an issue which the Conservatives lead over Labour. Keir Starmer's done a really, really good job in the last 18 months of getting back to basics, as it were, and focusing on issues which he knows the swing voter really cares about. Antisocial behaviour, law and order are really, really important. And the fact that this poll suggests that he has a lead over Rishi Sunak on those issues is really, sorry, my phone's about to drop, is really, really important. So all that Rishi Sunak can do is to focus on the details, double down on this issue and try and make sure that we can really make a difference that people on the street can see.
OK. Of course, people on the street will be able to have their say soon, going to the ballot box in the council elections very soon. Labour launching their local election campaign yesterday. And interesting, that gap between Labour and the Conservatives is narrowing. Labour's lead now down to 18 points. Is that where the Conservative Party wants to be, though, at this stage in the electoral cycle, do you think?
Obviously, any government would like to be in the lead in the opinion polls at any point. But what I think is really interesting is that since the start of the year, we have started to see the polls narrowing so that Labour aren't quite so far in the lead. And the key thing for the Prime Minister to do now is to keep on focusing on those issues. So he's made a big thing about the small boats. He's managed to pull off an incredible Windsor framework, which not everyone is happy with, but hopefully takes the heat out of the issues with the European Union. He's now moving on to a trade deal, and now hopefully they can have something that will really make a difference with antisocial behaviour that people will see.
Mark Lehain, you're a brilliant analyst. Really appreciated what you had to say. You're a rubbish cameraman, so stick to the day. Stick to the day job. Really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
See you again.